Mabuhay and welcome to More Than Just a Hand with Hand Therapist Blair. More Than Just a Hand is a podcast about hand therapy and sports orthopedic conditions in the upper limb, their management, and more. More Than Just a Hand features experts and leaders in the field of hand therapy and hand surgery and related fitness and health sectors here in Dubai and globally. We also feature patients, real people who have been through it all, here in More Than Just a Hand. And I am your host, Hand Therapist Blair. Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of my podcast, More Than Just a Hand. And today I have another dear colleague of mine from the United Kingdom, Michelle Razo, as a guest. How are you doing, Michelle?
I'm doing very well, Blair, and thank you so much for having me.
Oh, the pleasure is all mine, Michelle. So why don't you go ahead and tell our listeners more about yourself?
So my name is Michelle Razo. I am a registered occupational therapist and have been practicing for the past 14 years. I am also a certified hand therapist and work as a consultant hand therapist in Northern Ireland. So I am based within the UK and actually in Northern Ireland, just outside of Belfast City.
Adding to that, you were also one of the international guest speakers in the UAE Hand Therapy Symposium held last year here in Dubai.
Yes, indeed. I was in Dubai for the first time ever. I had been in the UAE previously, but in Dubai last year in November, and I was very delighted to have been asked to speak. It was a wonderful opportunity, lots of learning, very hands-on and wonderful to network and see the brilliant work that is being done not just in the UAE, but in the GCC and internationally, because we did have some other delegates and speakers from different countries.
Correct, because we also had our friend Nancy Zekmeister from the University Hospital of Zurich, Switzerland, who came over, and also Dr. Raquel Quintero from Malaga, Spain. And to go back to you, Michelle, I'm very curious on how you started your own private practice. Will you tell me more about it?
So I have been in my own private practice, which I started up independently with no actual backing from any consultants or surgeons or doctors back 5 years ago now. But I have been in Northern Ireland for now 7 years. And that was a mix of working within the National Health Service, which we call the NHS or the HSC as we call it in Northern Ireland. And before that, I was working for the NHS in London at Guy's and St. Thomas's Hospital. And before that, where I qualified and where I'm actually from is Texas. And I'm from El Paso, Texas, originally born and raised, and where I started working first thing as an OT and where I really developed a passion for upper limb and hand therapy.
That's interesting. So before you took the leap to cross the pond to the United Kingdom, did you always know that you're going to be a hand therapist or a hand therapy consultant, Michelle?
Yes, so I always knew that I wanted to do something in healthcare. And when I started going through university, I thought I wanted to be a medical doctor. And I actually did some time on an immersion program in Peru and was exposed to my first time ever to an occupational therapist. And I knew that that's what I wanted to do with the rest of my life and what I wanted to study and become. So I went through the whole program and graduated. And my first job was in El Paso, Texas at a level 1 trauma hospital. And it was the only level 1 trauma hospital within a 250-mile radius. So it was there that I had done my final placement as a student and where I got my first job. And I had a wonderful mentor that really helped me develop my, interest in upper limb and hand rehab. And it was throughout many different specialties. So you might have been in the ICU and doing hand therapy and passive work and maintenance work on people that were in comas. You would have had the neuro background where you were working and doing upper limb and hand rehab with people that had strokes, or you had the other types of trauma or rheumatological conditions that would have come through. So my experience and time at that hospital was both inpatient in a hospital in an acute setting and then in outpatient settings as well. So that in itself, as well as all the different specialties that I had the opportunity to see and practice in, really helped me, along with my mentorship at that time, get me excited about hand therapy.
It sounds like you had a very interesting career in the United States. So, what made you take the leap and move to the United Kingdom?
So, yes, so that was all very much kind of a personal journey, and really that I was at a point in my life where I said I want something different and I would like to practice somewhere different. And that is actually what brought me to the UK and living in the south of England and working in London for a period of time. And then again, I felt I needed another change, and I felt, let's go ahead and try Northern Ireland. So that's what I did. And so we've really, in terms of my journey, have had the past 10 and a half years being over here. And it's really given me some fantastic opportunities to really grow as an OT and grow as a hand therapist and developed my identity.
That's a very inspiring journey, Michelle. Thank you for sharing that. Now, many people know that hand therapists can either be an occupational therapist or a physiotherapist. How is the mixture in the practice there in the United Kingdom, Michelle?
Yeah, so that's what I actually found, is that when I transitioned to the UK, there is a lovely blend where you have, and that's very much the way that I saw it in England, was that there was a beautiful blend of, physios and OTs working side by side, and we were all doing the same job. But when I did register as an OT here in the UK and was looking to find jobs, it was very challenging to actually find jobs in hand therapy within the NHS. They're very competitive, and there's sometimes, you might not find the job listings out there. So you're having to wait and you're looking for opportunities. Oh, is this coming up at that hospital? Or maybe that's too far away. So I did have a number of months where I was job searching and was very, very fortunate to have interviewed for and been successful in applying for a post at Guy's and St. Thomas's Hospital in London. So I had started out as a senior OT at that time because of my previous experience, and we work within bandings in the UK. So we have an agenda for change banding is what we call it. So I was starting off as a band 6 at that time and was able to really thrive in that environment. And I cannot thank that group of hand therapists enough because of the mentorship, the support, a very positive type of environment that really fostered my ongoing development in how I treat my patients and my clients. So that was a wonderful experience. And then after a period of time, I was then able to move on to become a clinical specialist OT. And that was a band 7 role and was absolutely wonderful, where you're doing a little bit more of advanced practice. So being able to order x-rays, interpret x-rays, make clinical decisions about your patients, and have additional training to be able to do that, which is something very different, where we wouldn't have had those opportunities in the US. And I'm not sure if that's something that has come across to the UAE or not, Blair.
For now, we still don't have that in the scope of practice here in the UAE, but it also goes to show how much potential for growth there is. Also, having heard you talk about your path and your journey to becoming a consultant hand therapist there in the UK, it just emphasizes the need to really acquire a lot of skills and knowledge in order for a practitioner to be considered or to become a specialist in our field.
It is a very specialized area of practice. So you do need to have, certain skill sets and training and understanding of, the upper limb and hand. And it's easy enough to just say, this is what I am. But what do you have? What kind of experience, what kind of training do you have to back that? But I do believe, and from what I've seen and heard, and having visited the UAE, having visited the region and been in places like Qatar as well and doing teaching, is that you all have the opportunity for something very special over there, and the way that your outlook is on things and the way that you're doing things and supporting other therapists that want to develop into hand therapists is absolutely fantastic. And I found that very much so when I was at the Hand Therapy Symposium. It was so hands-on. It was all about sharing our knowledge with one another. And that was brilliant.
Michelle, can you tell me more about your experience in moving out of the NHS and into your private practice?
Of course. So when then I left Guy's and St. Thomas's in London, I made a lateral move to another clinical specialist role here in Northern Ireland. And I was working within the regional plastic surgery service for the whole of the country. So anything that required plastic surgery input would come to our hand therapy department. So it was wonderful to have that opportunity and to work with that team. And very quickly, within the same year, so I moved here in April, and then by that December, I had applied and interviewed and been successful in a consultant hand therapist post. So as a consultant hand therapist, you're at really the kind of max level of advanced clinical practice, to be autonomous, to be making decisions that for patients and for people that are coming through the service that would have traditionally been seen by medical doctors, so by surgeons. So we had something that was like a replacement service. So there were certain conditions that would come through us, and we would act as what would have traditionally been the role of medical doctors in saying, okay, well, you have this fracture, you need an x-ray. I'm going to order the x-ray. I'm going to make a decision of how long you need to be in the splint for. I'm going to go ahead and make the decision if you have K-wires in, when those come out, and I'm going to take those out. There is that different next level types of clinical skills that we had additional training for. And we were the ones that were updating their primary care doctors and writing letters and making those decisions. So it was a really great, space to work in and to have that higher level of practice and advanced practice, and to be working with the cohort of other therapists that were within the department. So that was, me for really a period until then, unfortunately, the pandemic hit and everything changed for everyone, as we know. But I felt that there was an opportunity at that point. Do I want to be thinking about something outside of the National Health Service? Do I want to be thinking about something that I can create? And as I briefly mentioned previously there, Blair, is that I did it on my own. And I'm really glad that I took that leap of faith, because it does really change your view, and you have a different hat on, different goggles, so to speak, and it's just a different type of flow and different types of patients and clients that are coming through the door. So that is where I started to build on that. And like I said, it's not something that I thought, oh, well, this is going to be great from the word go and everything's just going to flow smoothly, because you don't know what's on the other end. And sometimes it's just taking that, like I said, leap of faith and really taking the opportunity to say, well, there was a conversation that I had with another therapist, and they had mentioned, oh, well, I wouldn't want to see that client privately. I wouldn't want to see that patient privately. That wouldn't really be what I would want to get into. And I thought, well, I do. Why not? Why can't we just let our hair down a little bit and get into the muck and get our hands dirty? Because that's how we become better clinicians. And you might find that as well, Blair, is that those patients that come through that are the challenging ones that everyone else is shying away from, those are the ones I love.
Can you give me an example, or can you elaborate on that?
I have heard, and this is obviously by the grapevine, but other therapists where they'll say, well, they'll treat it, but they don't like to. And you kind of think, well, if you're going in with that mindset, that's going to feed off of the patient. That's going to feed off of your outlook is going to feed off on theirs. So if I have somebody that has been maybe to another therapist and they have said, oh, well, this is probably what you have, or maybe they can't even identify it. Sometimes that happens, where I've had patients come into my private practice and maybe they've actually been to a generalist physio and they think, oh, well, actually that looks like a tendonitis. Just do these stretches and do these strengthening and that'll be you. But there's something else happening under the surface. Or you have somebody that they go into a space and they're saying, well, we now have identified that this is what it is, but I'm not comfortable with that. And that's okay. There's going to be things that we're not going to be comfortable with seeing, but it's about how do we learn to be comfortable and to grow our knowledge and to have that in clinical reasoning, really, to be able to treat these difficult conditions. There's also, I would say, just generally, the really niggly wrists, people coming in with wrist pain, and they've been to other therapists, they've been to maybe their own primary care doctor, they've gone through the ringer, and it's just not going away. And I'm sure you have stories of that yourself, Blair, where people are coming in and they've tried it before and they're at their wits' end, and you're the person that they're looking for answers from.
Yes, Michelle, I have my fair share of that, like any other hand specialist out there. But what you said is a great reminder of how important it is for us to try and acquire as much experience as we could, how valuable good exposure is, and how important it is not to just improve ourselves and clinical reasoning skills through studies, but also through the collaboration and interaction, information exchange with our colleagues and other seasoned hand therapists, and as well as hand surgeons.
And I would say that that would be a difference. And I think sometimes it is where you are geographically, sometimes in your own training, where you would have the different types of clinical expertise in different parts of the upper limb and hand. I would say that in the US, from my practice there, at least from what I can say in the hospital and the outpatient centers that I worked in, we were very much fingertip to shoulder. So even as a student, you were getting stuck in with all of the shoulder cases, and those never actually went to physios. Those or physical therapists, those would go to the OTs. And that's just the way that the system was set up and the service was set up. And I'm so grateful that I had that opportunity and I've been able to maintain those skills, because my practice here in my independent practice would be very much hand to shoulder and inclusive of everything in between. So I've been fortunate to be able to also continue my education and my training to ensure that I am providing the best evidence-based practice for the clients that are coming through my door, and that if somebody comes in maybe with a hand or wrist problem, but they also are having something going on in their shoulder, that I feel comfortable and confident to say, well, we can sort that too. And we can cover that all together. So I would say that, from that transition, as you were saying before, Blair, is having that opportunity to then move from kind of a dual NHS private practice and kind of going back and forth, but seeing that there was an opportunity privately where I felt that there was a gap for the type of work that I wanted to do. That sometimes I feel like, depending on what type of department you're working in, or hospital or clinic, you are sometimes constrained to what you can do. And sometimes that's resources, it's time that you have. Sometimes it's that you would love to be able to get stuck in and treat something, but you're just not having that opportunity because that's just not the way that the service is set up. And that's okay. But then it's time to say, well, then is it time to transition and move on from that? And that's what I had found, was that I was at that point where we said, okay, let's move on and let's see what this new journey will bring.
And are you happy with your decision, Michelle?
Oh, I'm delighted. Yes, I am very happy, because this is part of who I am. And Blair, I've said it to people before, and I'll say it to you now and to your listeners, is that being a hand therapist, for me, this is who I am. This is what I identify as a person. So this isn't just a career for me, or this is like, oh, well, this is Michelle's profession. This is actually me. So to be able to have the opportunity to give myself and what I can offer the patients out there, or my clients that have really struggled or that are struggling, and to be able to give them 100% of myself, is so rewarding. So not that didn't happen when I was in public health service, because I think we all give as much as we can to our patients, to our colleagues. We try our best, don't we?
Indeed, I agree with you on that one. Yes, we do give a lot in our sessions to our colleagues and to our patients, but this is a common trait, in my opinion, that I have observed amongst the hand specialists and hand therapists that I've interacted with, who are very passionate about their work. There's always this fire that burns within each and every one of us, that passion.
Exactly. Yes, and I think that really, when you have a a passion for it, you don't look at it as work. And I'm not coming in thinking that this is a job. It's a calling, and it is that giving where it is, you're not expecting anything in return. But when that person walks out the door and you have allowed them to regain, independence, function, the things that are meaningful to them, their meaningful occupations as OTs, that is something, it's not just words, it's something very real. That is the reward, isn't it?
True. There is an inherent reward in helping our patients recover and helping them regain their function and get back into their lives. And for me, I call that the graduation day. So I tell my patients that one of the happiest days that I'd be working with them is when they graduate from my therapy sessions and they get discharged.
And I think that there are a lot of like-minded therapists like ourselves, Blair, out there, that it's not just work and it's not, just a job. So I would say, yes, I am happy and really thrilled with what is the potential of what I can offer those out there that do need the help and do need the assistance, really.
Now, Michelle, from the business perspective of running your own clinic, how is it going?
So I would say that from that point of view, it's never going to be all up, 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 and that you're going to always have, everything is going to be 100% full every single day. But it's nice and steady, and there are some really busy days, and there's days where you can actually step back and do other things. But I feel like I have a real variety of the types of work that I do. So it's not just treating patients. I also am a certified expert witness. So I would be doing assessments and providing medico-legal services for people that may have had personal injuries. And I'm instructed by lawyers and solicitors to help with those types of cases. So that would be something a little bit different.
Oh, cool. That's another dimension that you've added into your practice. How did you get into that?
So it was something that I had wanted to get into for some time, and I knew of other therapists that had, been doing the work, and also surgeons, and having some informal chats with other colleagues as well. And I thought, this is something that I would like to try. It's something very different. I have the skill set to be able to offer my expertise, and how can I do that? So I actually went through a course that was run by Cardiff University in Wales and another entity called Bond Solon, and was able to go through a whole coursework and examination to become a certified expert witness. So then that gives you, for example, that gives you the skills to be able to say, I know how to write a report in the way that it's going to be at the gold standard expected by the courts, and that you're presenting that, and the legal counsel will be happy and the judge will be happy. And then that if you get called to court to testify, that you can be cross-examined, and having those skills and knowing the whole legal process. So it's very different.
Wow, so that's spicing up the clinical practice with some courtroom drama.
Indeed.
Yes, but I'm sure it's not that easy because you'll have to be technical and scientific in the whole process.
Exactly. And for example, you're providing the evidence in a very non-biased way, because you are only providing the actual services, for the court. So you're not, even though you might be instructed by the person that's been injured, you're not really choosing sides, let's say, and you're just saying, this is my completely unbiased opinion. This is what it is, and this is fact. And being able to back that with your skills. And you, in the UK, you don't have to be a certified expert witness to be able to do that. There are people out there that still do this type of work, but they don't have the certification. But I felt for the types of maybe legal counsel that I would be instructed by, or for the clients that might be coming in, that I want to give them the absolute best. And I want to be able to provide the best type of service. So that's what kind of led me to go for the certification.
I know that I've said this earlier, but I am going to repeat it. Your desire to continually improve yourself, to upskill, and to pursue knowledge in order to provide the best services that you can for your patients and also to serve your community is truly inspiring and commendable, Michelle. Now, in line with this, what message would you give the other therapists who would like to reach the same level that you have?
So I would say to them to take the opportunity at any point in time to expand your knowledge. That can be with a simple conversation, chatting to a therapist that has had more experience and has lived it and worked it and knows. Not being afraid to go on courses, to develop oneself. And this was something that we have briefly chatted about, you and I, Blair, is that there is that skilling of differential diagnosis. And that is something that is more about upskilling people that are very new to the profession. And that takes time. And I would say the way that I had gotten into developing my differential diagnosis skills was at Guy's and St. Thomas's in London. And it was fostered that these are the types of patients that are come through the door, and it's going to be thumb pain or wrist pain, and you need to figure it out. And then you had that support from the team to say, well, then you have to do these clinical tests. You need to look for this. You have to ask these questions. And it's about having that clinical reasoning and that want to be able to target that in the best possible way. I would say in the UK and in Northern Ireland, the British Society of Surgery for the Hand run instructional courses twice a year in Manchester, and they're every spring and summer. And I have found that attending those courses as a therapist, and they are geared a bit surgical heavy sometimes, but you do have representation from hand therapists and the input from hand therapists going there, that I have been able to develop more of my skills at those courses from a more advanced practice level and the differential diagnosis side of things. So I would say that look for opportunities like that type of a course. Look for opportunities where you are going to be able to look at radiographic imaging of the wrist and hand, and how do you systematically analyze and interpret x-rays. And also on top of that, just consistently being open to learning. That would be my advice to somebody that is really maybe new and wanting to get into it, and always thinking about looking for an advanced specialty credential and wanting to perhaps take that next step where you might be challenged, as myself did and many other people, taking the certified hand therapist exam or becoming an accredited hand therapist, whether you be here in the UK or in Australia or in Europe. So it's just taking those opportunities to push yourself and don't be afraid to.
That is a beautiful message, Michelle. Thank you. Now, you mentioned differential diagnosis, which I think is a crucial skill that needs to be acquired or developed by every clinician, every hand therapy specialist, because it is our ability to differentially diagnose that allows us to work around cases not being confined strictly by protocols. Now, don't get me wrong, I do follow protocols, but what I'm saying here is that I personally do not want to be confined exclusively by the borders of those protocols, simply because there are so many other variables that needs to be considered, and it is never singular in every case.
I would say we are singing from the same hymn sheet, you and I. And it was something that I'm so glad that you brought up, because what I am seeing more and more, and I can't really probably say anything maybe outside of this region in terms of me working in Northern Ireland. So maybe not being able to say for England, Scotland or Wales, what things are like there, because it's been a few years since I have worked in England. However, I am saying that it is so protocol driven and we have guidelines, but that's what they are. They're guidelines. So they're there for us to refer to. And you're never going to do something where you're going to rupture a tendon, or that you're going to do something that could completely ruin the healing of a fracture and cause a completely, a non-union. But there is like a shift where is the clinical reasoning going and where has it gone? And you have these, you said, people that are getting into hand therapy and they're, new to the profession and they want to learn. And that is what they're learning too. And that is such a really sad thing, because you do lose that really important clinical reasoning skill. And it's something that I had briefly brought up actually when I was at the Hand Therapy Symposium with yourselves in the autumn. And you developed something that I like to call proximity blindness.
Tell me more about proximity blindness.
You're treating something and you're thinking, okay, this is straightforward and I'm following the protocol and I'm doing this and I'm doing that. And your field of view is becoming smaller and smaller because you're focusing or hyper-focused on this one thing. And then what happens is you can't see the forest for the trees. And there's so many other things happening outside of that real small space that is actually maybe adversely impacting progress, them meeting their goals, causing other types of symptoms. And you've lost it because you're looking into this very small field of view and you become blind to what's happening outside. And I have seen as well, and like you said, not to say that the way that I do things is 100% right and this is the way it is and this is the way you should practice, because that's not what I'm saying. And it's definitely not what you're saying. But when you're saying people coming into, the practice here into clinic and they're saying, well, I was told I just needed to continue to do this for this amount of time. And I'm thinking, but it's time to move on to this, or actually we have to pull back and we need to maybe not go that quickly, just like you said. And it's at a detriment to their progress. And it's at a detriment to us as therapists if we are being led by that, isn't it?
It is, and I agree with you on that. And when it happens, you lose the opportunity to develop a practice that is grounded and fortified with critical analysis and critical thinking.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I have had peers say to me, or maybe say to some of our doctors and surgeons, well, if there's anything that is wrist related, send it to Michelle. She's the wrist expert. You're never an expert. You're never an expert, and you're constantly learning. You just have to, and in terms of me personally, I would say, Blair, is about targeting those skills, the differential diagnosis, being able to identify when maybe proximity blindness is coming into play, and really honing in on those skills that will form part of your specialism, versus being, okay, well, I'm the expert. Well, we're never, are we? If you might think you are, but it's just about having that confidence that somebody can come in and you can say, yes, I think that this is what's going on and this is the way that we're going to treat it. So it's having that confidence in yourself and your own skills that you're doing the best for your patient.
That's for sure. And learning is never ending. And like what I always say, every time that I learn something new, it makes me realize how little I know and how much more there is to learn. So on that note, we're going to put this conversation on hold and continue our topic in the next episode of this podcast. Thank you for joining me for today's podcast, and I'll see you again for the second part of our conversation, Michelle.
Thank you so much, Blair, for the opportunity. I hope that your listeners enjoyed it, and I look forward to part 2 as well. Thank you so much.
And that is all for this episode. Thank you everyone for keeping me company today, and I hope that you found this episode helpful and informative. For your comments and topic suggestions, connect with me on Instagram, LinkedIn, and Twitter. Find out how on my website, visit www.handtherapistblair.com today. And also, click that support button below and share this episode now. Join me again next time here in More Than Just a Hand. Once again, this is your host, your Pinoy hand therapist, Blair. Wishing everyone a wonderful day at maraming salamat po. Paalam!